Okay. Well, I guess we start. It's coming up to 5 past. So welcome to our generative discussion, our polyphonic documentary panel. This is intended to be a slightly different format from the usual presentation format. And as the title says, we want it to be a generative discussion. So what we're going to do is we're each going to speak for 5 minutes, and we've all got a round object that we're going to pass on to the next speaker. So we're kind of going to do a round, just talking about the project, what it means to us, and then we're going to do another round where we all speak for 5 minutes. So in total, we'll speak for 10 minutes. That'll take about an hour, and then we've got another 45 minutes for a generative discussion. So what we want people to do is to put questions in the chat as they come up. You know, feel free to comment, put things in the chat, and then we'll tease those out when we come to questions. And also at that point, people can put their hands up and speak on screen. So that's the plan. So I'm Judith, and I'm the one of the 2 conveners of the Polyphonic documentary project, with our colleague Stefano Odorico. But the people here today, we've all got a specific interest in anthropology. So I'm really involved with the RAI, I'm chair of the film committee, and I'm also the co-founder of iDocs, which is a research group based in Bristol, looking at evolving forms of documentary practice. And I bring my particular interest in anthropology to that. And what we as a group, Polyphonic Documentary, is like a subset of the iDocs research group that's particularly interested in the multiple windows in computers and how they can offer new ways or different ways of thinking about multi-perspectivity. And that takes us into polyphony and the idea, building on Bakhtin's idea of the polyphonic novel, but extending authorship out from the individual author to collect it, in this instance, to collective authorship. So we are a co-creational group from within the iDocs community, exploring our own practice as people with a strong interest in anthropology and a strong interest in documentary making and a strong interest in speculative futures. And what we're doing is we're experimenting with interactive authoring tools and the diffractive ethnography method, which might come up in more detail in our 5 minutes, or it can come up in the questions at the end. But it's very much about challenging our own practice, working with these tools, bringing theories of emergence, speculation, using the camera as a tool to kind of look to the future, look forwards, using the camera as a direct tool to kind of change the way, to a tool to think with, really, and to change the way we think about things. So the practice we're doing at the moment is playful, it's experimental. We're not creating end products for a specific audience at the moment. We're creating work, we're creating interventions that stimulate and provoke dialogue within us as a team to think about new practices with documentary, and this idea of polyphony, which is multiple perspectives, multiple voices, but where within the window you can juxtapose different film clips and you can engage with them in a non-linear, emergent sort of way as a research tool, but also as a thinking tool, which can then also lead to end products. So we all have our own practices beyond this project. So we're also thinking about what we're learning collectively, how that can apply into our own separate and related projects. And we'll talk about some of us will talk about that a bit as well. So that's the general tone of what we're doing. The project's been going since, it's on and off. It's got a little bit of funding, but we're doing it around other things primarily. So, you know, it's kind of stop-start. It's when we can get together. We have online meetings. There's about 70 of us on Discord. So we're using the social media Discord channel, and we've got a website called polyphonicdocumentary.com. It's in the chat. So if anyone's interested in finding more about the project or getting in touch, you can do that via this. But we're doing rounds of creative experiments. Our first one was on what polyphony meant to us, where we all submit clips, we put them in a folder, and then we share them and we remix them and we rework them using different interactive authoring tools. We're working with 2 specific tools at the moment that we'll tell you about, because the developers of those 2 tools are part of this group. So we've got the developers, you know, so they're the practical, tangible tools we can work with, but we're not just tied to those tools. It's quite open-ended and very exploratory. So I think I've said enough, just as by way of an introduction. And I am going to pass, I have an onion, and I'm going to pass the onion to Florian, who has another item.
And here it is, it's the onion. My name is Florian Thalhofer. I am living in Berlin, and I have a background of an artist. And I invented a software called Korsakov that is a tool to make generative relational films. And I was often asked why I invented that tool, and I always said it was a coincidence. I think this is not quite true. It's like saying that it is a coincidence is like black boxing what is a much more complex reason behind it. But I might get into that in the second part. What I would like to show you now is a project that I made basically out of the meeting that we did after we did our second round. So we made a film together, a Korsakov film and a Stornoway film, and then we had a meeting, and I was super fascinated with that meeting and made a Korsakov film out of that meeting, and this is what we're going to see now. So I'll share my screen and here we go. Suck. So, okay.
Brilliant.
So let me know what you want to see. So everydayness, no end, ironic, important, hands-on mouse, journalism.
Important.
Important.
It's important,
Right.
you know, just to play. Cool.
Now, quicker, tell me, what do you want to see?
Mozambique.
Mozambique.
The way lots of Mozambicans watch films in Mozambique is without understanding the words, what people are saying. So they're actually building their whole narrative, and you can actually grab people when they're coming out, because they watch them in, you know, really small groups on small screens, loads of people watching in little places, and you can ask them when they come out what was the story about, and you'll get 10 different stories from 10 different people. And they've all got these stories of when it used to be film. The projectionists would randomly put the reels
in different order.
in different orders, or actually
Really
different
wouldn't
films,
matter. Fantastic.
and nobody would mind. And also people would have to, because you had to wear a pair of shoes to go into the cinema. So 5 friends would have 1 pair of shoes, and they'd go in and watch a bit of the story and then come back out and share and find the story together from the different bits that they watched.
Ironic, darkness, stories, hands-on mouse, whatever, journalism.
Stories.
Stories.
This idea that narrative arc is narrative. That's how stories are told, and that's human nature. I mean, to me, it's a construct, and it's a construct that is a useful way of looking at things, and it's found across many cultures the world over through time, but it's not the only way. And I just think once we get to a state where we think that is the way, you know, the way and the only way, then we're in trouble, because we'll start to believe that construct is reality.
Meaning, boring, fun, Canada, how, sound.
How?
How?
So I'm not sure how that's going to work, Florian.
I don't know either.
Great comment, journalism, darkness, meaning, Canada, experimental.
Canada.
Where is Canada? Here we go.
Well, my entry into documentary film was in Canada when I went to do that course. Obviously, it was a documentary film course, but in that course, we had to make a film. And I found when doing that course that we had to subscribe to that narrative arc, and so for me, it was really restrictive. And then a few years later, happening upon interactive documentary film on Korsakoff, that was years ago now, 2013. For me, it just blew things open, and it just gave me all this space and freedom.
Whatever. Brain, great comment, darkness, audience, meaning. Let me know.
Audience in the chat.
Audience.
How the audience are the ones who create the final meaning.
Great. Okay. Sound, meaning, future, past, now, right, wrong, professor. Great comment.
Future, past, now.
Future, past, now.
So just wanted to respond to Kathleen's Kathleen, you are at the same time in my past and my future. It's a really, really complicated situation.
It's around 1 p.m. here in Colorado, and so it's like we're kind of in that. It's just you're in my future and I'm in your past. That's all.
No, sorry. We are all in the now. We are all in the moment. Yeah. The problem is just because the world is sphere.
I guess we solved it. This is a real Korsakoff. It's the live Korsakoff here, so you don't need to do it anymore.
Expectation, meaning, experimental, professor, learn, us.
Meaning.
And this is the last clip.
When it's interactive, it's letting the audience in and letting them find their own meaning. But not everybody will want to find their own meaning for sure. You're not spoon feeding them, but those people who are, they can.
Oh, we have one more. Hands on mouse, darkness, everydayness, great comment, experimental, whatever. Quick.
Whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah, it really is. It's up to us as a group to work out what we want to do with these materials, what comes to mind. If people want to say, well, how about if we added some extra materials in to develop it further? People who wanted to could, or whatever, really.
Okay, thank you very much. That was my first part, and I hand over my ball to Karen. And she has she had technical problems.
Yes, but I have your ball, which has beautifully turned into an egg now. So thank you, Florian. That was a great way to combine learning about our group and about the software. That was fantastic. So I am Karen. I've been making sort of normal linear, had the timer on for that, documentaries for many years. And when I actually, from when I started enjoying the bonus extras on DVDs, I loved the fact that I could choose the order that I watched things in. And I enjoyed some certain interactive DVDs that got me very excited about the possibility of non-linear narratives. So that's what I'm doing in the group, and I'd like to spend the rest of this 5-minute slot sharing what I did. In fact, this is my technical problem. So Judith is going to share her screen, and I'll keep my audio going and just explain you what it is while she's doing it. So this is the first thing I did in the Polyphonic documentary group. I did as an individual, and it was to take these clips that we've all been had been shooting for this project into Stornoway. So later in the second group, second block, I'm going to share with you what I did with a group in Korsakoff. But my first engagement with this non-linear approach was through Stornoway, And this gives an idea. I'd love to do what Florian did and give everyone the choice, but some of these clips are a bit longer, and because we've only got a few minutes, I'll actually choose, Judith, what we play. But if you want to play it now, then
can you just explain the theme as well, Karen?
Oh yes, we haven't worked that out yet. So the theme is extreme heat, and so we were all individually asked to film on anything we like in either format, things that resonated with us with this theme of extreme heat. So that's why I've called this particular Korsakoff experiment "Musings on Heat," and it's just using some of the contributions of the group. So let's let's just put the introduction.
And
I can't hear any sound. Judith, did you share it with sound?
Oh, hang on. Yes, I should have sound. Can you not hear sound? Is there no sound?
There is no sound, Judith.
Oh, I've got sound on Zoom, so it should.
So if you stop sharing, and then when you share in the interface, that window, you can choose share sound and optimize for sharing. Might be that.
So how do I do that? Let's go. So what do I do?
Share? If you click the share screen button, the big green button, the first thing that comes up is like a pop-up window, and at the bottom it says share sound.
Yes,
and optimize for video clip.
Brilliant. Okay. So now, where's the window that we had? Copy of musings. Here we are. Yeah. Okay. We might be in business. Is it sharing the right screen?
Can't see anything yet.
No, I must be sharing the other screen at the moment. Oh, I'm so sorry, everyone. I can't do this just because of my own sound problems, and now we've got sound problems in the other.
All right, let's go. Right, I'm going to do this again. So now here we go. Share screen, share sound, optimize for video. I think we're in now.
Yeah.
Great. Can you hear it now?
Yeah.
Right. So we want the introduction.
Please. So I don't know about everyone else, but I can just see this weird grey box, which we shouldn't really be seeing. Can everyone else see that on the right-hand side?
Yes, I can. I think, Judith, maybe you just move the windows around. I think it might be the Zoom window blocking.
It's a Zoom window,
Yeah.
yes.
That gone?
Okay.
Is that
But
better?
not really. You just need to completely get rid of that.
There we are. How about that?
Well, okay. And then if you can put it on full screen, and then play Too Hot.
Right. Too hot.
The word's extreme.
This could be extremely hot, but unfortunately it's extremely expensive.
Hot dog.
You a hot dog? Hey?
Let's go to final musics.
Did I call it dark in there? Pardon my ignorance. I did not realize the light of cognizance you wrote into my DNA. Did I call it cold in there? Pardon my ignorance. I did not realize the warmth of blood you shared in my veins. Did I call it messy in there? Pardon my ignorance. I did not realize the order in the disorder you put in place. Did I call it less, what you gave? Pardon my ignorance. I did not realize the unyielding generosity you bestowed than my share. Did I give anything back in return? Pardon my ignorance. I did not realize the unsung reciprocity I had to honor in your name. Did I make it better, this place, for you and me and the entire human race? Pardon my ignorance. I did not pay much heed, consumed by narcissism. My ego left me displaced. Can I do it again? Try one more time to make it better in your order of disorder, under the light of cognizance, and share the same in unsung reciprocity and unyielding generosity to make this a better place and show my ego its place? Pardon my ignorance. I should have been this long ago.
Thank you, Judith. You can stop sharing. And so I've just shared the link in the chat. So everybody, please feel free to copy this, and then you can watch it in your own time. So I think you've got the idea, though. The way that this particular project works is that you choose what you're going to watch next. And I think now I'm going to pass over to Franzi, who's going to describe and talk about more about Korsakoff, which is the one that the other software that we're working in. So I can talk more about Stornoway in our discussion, but for now I'm going to pass the egg across to are you there, Francie?
Yeah, yes,
there you
I'm Thank you. So hi, my name is Franzi. I'm a visual anthropologist from Germany, and currently working as a digital learning designer at the Brandenburg University of Technology. So at the moment, I'm sort of trying to bring all my interests together. So I have a strong interest in visual anthropology and documentary and ethnographic film. And now I'm shifting more into learning design and using interactive media to support transformative learning and to support sustainable development, really. So trying to bring it all together. And in my PhD, I looked at the emerging field of documentary and ethnographic filmmaking practices. And more precisely, I looked at iDocs, interactive documentary, and at the tools that are used within this field. And I'm just going to share my screen, but I don't really have much to show. I'm just have a few images to go with my speaking. So I think the focus on tools comes very natural to me as a visual anthropologist trained in the theory and practice of ethnographic filmmaking, because the intention to make a film is strongly tied to the technical equipment. So the question, what kind of tools will I be using? And especially as a filming ethnographer, it was often just myself working as a researcher in the field, doing the ethnography and holding the camera at the same time. So it draws a lot of attention to my skills with these tools, what kind of tools I'm using, and how skillful I am. So it draws attention to the tools, but also to my relationship with these tools. And I was particularly interested in software And so I'm in the Polyphonic documentary project. Naturally, I'm interested in the tools that we use. And as was said before, we are using Korsakoff and Stornoway. I haven't really looked deeply into Stornoway yet, but I have looked into Korsakoff during my PhD. And I found that its design, let me go to the, and I found that Korsakoff's design lends itself to a radically different approach to making documentaries. So I found that it follows more radically the logic of a computer. And with that, I mean, for example, that the computer allows for the nonlinear random access retrieval of information. And Korsakoff takes that very seriously and sort of almost rejects the idea of creating fixed linear sequences like we are used to in film. Of course, you can still do that with Korsakoff, but the design lends itself more to creating loose connections that are multiple. So we have one clip that can join up with a lot of different clips. So it's not fixed which clip the next clip will join up to. So one link can have many destinations rather than one link only having one destination. And that happens in real time. So you have to export the project, view it in the browser, and then there's this procedural logic going on. And this procedural logic is, this is my provocation, it's particularly suitable for polyphonic documentary because it allows us to discover and sustain the multitude of relations and perspectives that are active in the material, but also between us and the material. But this procedural logic only comes to bear when we as authors take a step back. So it doesn't just happen because we're using the tools, but it depends on the mindset and the approach that we are bringing to the tools. And to some extent, it asks us to work against the grain of filmmaking. And yeah, it's really about the relationship, which I'm also very interested in, the relationship between us and software, and shifting that relationship from a deterministic view that is often still very present also in ethnographic filmmaking, that the tools are only assisting us and they are like an instrument, and shifting that more towards an understanding of software as a collaborator. So we are actively and consciously collaborating or co-creating with software. And I will talk about this more in the next round. So I'll stop the sharing. And I will pass my ball on to Bharat.
Thank you. And I have a summer fruit of chiku with me here. And this will go to Daniel next. Hi, I'm Bharat, and I'm a PhD student between University of Exeter and University of West of England. And through my supervisor, Judith Ashton, I got introduced into the iDocs community as well as the Polyphonic documentary project. And it has been a whole new revelation for me, because what I barely understood through text, I'm now getting to learn about and practice it with the Polyphonic documentary group, which has had a lot of learnings that I'm lending into my fieldwork that I'm currently part of now. So we've been talking about the tools, the interactive documentary tools, and the evolution of the interactive documentary has been pushing the boundaries of these innovative technologies for interactivity at the core of its delivery mechanism, to let audience control the narrative and determine how the documentary unfolds. These digital media advancements are opening possibilities for interactive storytelling, but there's also a need to explore iDocs in ways that can address the social challenges of digital disparity, digital literacy, and access, questioning at the same time the need for enforcing technology and the ever-changing cultural, social, and more importantly, the ethical roles in documentary making and consumption. And that's where I am actually exploring my PhD in. We must be conscious that the documentary making as a form of mediated representation, the reality is predominantly still about people, communities, and environment, where the role of technology is that of a mediator and a collaborator. And this focus must remain co-opted into our thinking and adoption of technologies of interactive documentary. In this particular sense, I'm exploring low to no tech thinking and its application in what I'm exploring in my PhD. My PhD is about ethnography of a commodity, a thing in ginger, and it's about following it around within its diverse landscape composed as a south-to-south commodity chain. The low to no tech thinking within the project is about adaptive versus intrusive technology, wherein the project is conceived and sketched with the prevailing technology within the researched communities. And the omnipresence of smartphones as the most common piece of image-making technology across Ginger's diverse communities qualify as the most obvious choice for adoption into the project. Smartphones, with their potency to create audiovisual content of a progressively good, presentable output quality, is easily adaptable into environments of different digital literacy without compromising on its familiarity based on the contention that smartphones have become an extended human body part. And a smartphone in a landscape mode in anybody's hand has the potential to become a tool of creation and expression. And this project is about exploring such a potential to collaborate and make visible a highly extractive and a gamble of a crop in ginger by following it into its various communities from its place of origination in the Western Ghats of Karnataka in southern India through to multiple places of transaction and value addition until the final site of consumption. The practice of interactive documentary will therefore constitute the geography of ginger that makes visible the complex assemblages of global capitalism and its market-based extractivism, which challenges the delicate ecological balance and life sustenance possibilities of a biodiversity hotspot and a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Western Ghats. And to make visible essentially means to rehumanize and re-ecologize the global systems of provision. In doing so, I borrow my thinking of exercising radical democracy in making visible representation of the unrepresented and underrepresented from the laboratory of Polyphonic documentary project. Its exploratory and experimentative spirit of collaboration and co-creation has brought out for me themes of relationality and resonance within diversity of thought, perception, process, and practice that makes Ginger's communities unique within their own skin. Such thoughts have augmented the multidisciplinary imagination of Ginger's universe and set them in dialogue with each other's reality, a reality that embodies entanglements ecological, political, and sociocultural in nature, a reality whose definition has a potential to be ever expanding, allowing to embrace the breadth of lived and observed experiences as Judith et al. Have contended. And by extending interactivity beyond the documentary's delivery mechanism to incorporate processes of documentary production, interactive documentaries can consolidate agency and authorship to not just end users, but also to the content contributors. It thereby accommodates a dynamic relationship amongst the authors, the users, the digital interface, and the environment that allows for a flexible co-development of representing reality. In so doing, allows for the non-hierarchical co-authoring of multiple perspectives from within Ginger's communities to inform their reality from within their applicable contexts. Thank you. Okay, Daniel, here's your Chiku.
Thank you, Bharat, for this marvelous orange from India. My name is Daniel, and I live in Freiburg, like Hannes, who is part of our audience. And I'm teaching at Offenburg University, which is close to Freiburg, interactive media and interactive film and artistic research. I'm also part of this funny group. And my interest is a similar one than Bharat just explained, the extended mind. And I ask myself why I stick to a certain tool, which is called Clint. And most of you will be familiar with this. And my research is, since 10 years, a project which is called Deglobalize. We've been also to the Western Ghats in India and moved through several stations. We ask ourselves how to think through and with media, and how to deconstruct our notion of the global. So it's about climate change and so on. And we've got some theoretical references, which I would consider now as a heritage, since most of these people died within the last years. So one theoretical reference, which was very interesting for us, was Bruno Latour, who died half a year ago, dealing with actor networks theory, with the question of the network. And Michel Serres, who died in 2019, who was the teacher of Latour, who dealt with a parasite with the question of bifurcations, how to go which way, and with topologies. And also Jean-Luc Nancy, who we cooperated with. In fact, we had invited him to the Kommunale keynote 10 years ago. He died 2 years ago, and he was dealing with the question of structures, how things are entangled in each other. And Peter Weibel, who passed away last week, the director of the Center for Arts and Media in Karlsruhe, who dealt with media, data, and the human. So this is a heritage that we are dealing within this project, and we are taking these terms and these figures that I just mentioned in order to think about how our extended mind is entangling our thinking, our feeling, our affections with the media. And yeah, one question that I personally ask myself is why I stick to Clint. In this project, we are also dealing with Korsakov and with Stornoway. And I'm going to talk in the second round about a project that we deal with these two tools. And in the end, it's about, like Ingold says, about how to entangle story and life, how to not. That is also a topological question. We did some experiments about that. That was in fact in Bangalore in the Western Ghats a few years ago, that we took a bunch of water pipes, and talked to each other, an old hippie experiment, and to see what's coming out of the pipe and who is talking to whom. And this is a nice feature of Clint, as most of you might know, that one can sort one's own extended mind in this kind of a network, and it's a growing entity of medial artifacts. In fact, they are not connected via keywords. There is no intelligence built into it, and I want to move away from it, but as I said, I reflect very much about why I stick to this kind of tool. Talking with Ster, who talks about the topology of Venetian bridges. It's always about bridging and getting rid of the bridge. This is a reference that I like with Clint. And also, if you think about the cut-ups of William Burroughs. So this is just to throw in some theoretical terms. So my time is over, and I hand on the orange to Karen.
Can't hear you yet.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you end your screen share, Daniel? Thank you. So now I'm taking the orange into an egg, and I'm going to talk to you about the next phase in the Polyphonic documentary project. So the first example I shared with you was in Stornoway, and I can share in the discussion how this sort of works in a
a sort of visual map, because I see that we've had a few nice maps from Francie and Daniel. So I can share the Stornoway map with you in the discussion. But then I joined a group with 2 other members of the Polyphonic Documentary Research Group, one of whom is with us, which is Vanessa, and another Zeynep is, I'm sure, going to watch this recording. And the 3 of us decided to explore specifically two aspects of the clips that everybody had contributed to the group. We're looking specifically in relation to the way that color informs choice and the way that sound, not just choice, informs meaning making. We're looking at how juxtaposition and montage can inform meaning. So Chen is going to help me with sharing their contributions. We worked as a group, but the way we've done it is that each person is playing around in the software and sharing their experiment with the group, so that it sort of makes it like we're 3 times as efficient as if we were working on our own. So I thought in the collaborative and dialogic nature of the Polyphonic Documentary Group that I would bring in the voices of the other 2 members of my group. And so they've both recorded little presentations, which Chen is going to share. Is that right? Can you share the Zeynep one first, Chen?
Okay, yes.
So Zeynep's based in Istanbul, and she'll introduce, I want us to think, we're thinking as well about the whole nature of collaborative work. So I think she's going to talk a bit about that.
For months, we have been taking notes and on a common folder, and we have been in touch. And I think we met around 10 times, let's say. And we are in constant contact. I should mention this because without this, for me, it wouldn't be possible to create a project, maybe. This is my first experience in co-creation in a polyphonic documentary project. And I basically worked on the transitions, shadows, shades, movements, and concept of appearance versus reality by juxtaposing some videos with some fancy footage with some potentially risky sound track in order to underline the fact that global warming or climate crisis can have some different meanings. And even, for example, the water can mean something different in something that gives some different content and context to different audiences.
Yeah, so I'll just talk while you can just line up the one from Vanessa. Jen, thank you. Just to explain, I think actually most of the people in this are people comfortable with these ideas, but just
just so for those of you who aren't, that version of Korsakov, the layout is decided by the person designing it. So on that example, we are experimenting with the 3 at the bottom and a most dominant image at the top, and playing around with sound. And now I'll pass over to Vanessa, who's going to share a bit of her project and describe her way of thinking within the group.
I'll just start by showing the project that I made in the last months.
So all the leaves have fallen really early this year.
The words extreme and heat make me think of our energy meter.
And it will continue like this. Well, my basic idea was that when I first watched all the clips from that were provided to the Polyphonic documentary project, I found the colors very apparent, and didn't really have any idea what to do with that, but I wanted to explore it. So I thought about color coding the clips and maybe grouping them together, juxtaposing them to kind of maybe find answers or impressions to what colors are filmed, what does the way we filmed colors say about what we filmed or about the topic of extreme heat. So that was one idea that I had. The other idea was that I really wanted to work with loops. And the idea behind that was that I find the moment of decision very interesting and how it is created in interactive documentaries. And I found loops very interesting in the sense that they're not rendering the moment of decision as a stressful moment, but leave the viewers space for themselves to decide when they want to continue. It doesn't create like a blank space once a clip is over. The other thing I wanted to do with the interface was to make it possible to have multiple clips playing at the same time. And I played around with a lot of versions. I had a full a 4-clip interface and this 9-clip interface. Ended up liking the 9-clip interface more because it was very much more about how those clips played together. We also discussed this in the group a lot, that we didn't want to give one clip too much weight in this kind of montage. And it's very interesting to kind of hover over these 9 clips and see what happens when one starts playing with the other.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So you can go off the screen share, and I'll be passing over, but I've used up my time specially just to share with you some of these end products. But of course, our group is very much about process. These are all work in progress. It's the actual process and the collaborative process, which is what is so exciting about this Polyphonic documentary project. So I hope we'll get more chance to discuss our methods and what we're thinking in the discussion afterwards. But for now, I will pass my egg over to Bharat.
Thank you. So whatever the deliberations and considerations that I shared in the first bit, I took them to the field. So in co-opting smartphone-based storytelling, I considered its environmental and ethical positionality. So for me, detechnologizing meant ecologizing interactive documentary practice, taking into due consideration the adaptive technology and the ethics of technology use. The project has crowdsourced majority of its technology needed for the documentary practice. It's a conscious choice of regressive technological consumerism as a means of progressive ecologism. Vocalizing for ecological, social, and politically conscious technology use must penetrate the practice of media making as well. It must challenge the irony of technologies which themselves could be the product of social and environmental injustice, used in advocating for causes of similar nature elsewhere. By so doing, it will add another dimension of environmental ethics to the dialogues of constantly evolving social and cultural ethics of documentary in the digital media environment. Like I said, my current fieldwork has been crowdsourced majority of the technology needed, including the smartphones, the point-and-shoot cameras, the laptop, the tripod, the lapel mics, and the numerous charging and data transfer cables. So crowdsourced technology and crowdsourced skills are currently at play, documenting narratives from field sites. In so doing, the project has opened up aspects of practice that are anthropocentric and ecocentric, instead of technocentric, exploring as far as possible a collaborative bottom-up approach to making geographies of ginger visible through human and more than human participation. And to share from my most recent experience from a field, instinctive co-creation I got to witness at play in multiple instances, attributable possibly to the familiarity of the technology of the smartphones that were being used, as well as the bond that developed over the time spent together in building personal relationships. For example, there was one, I was supposed to show clips, but I'm not able to present at the same time I speak, so please bear with me. So there was one instance where in a conversation, one of the contractors was in a conversation with another labor contractor lady, and it was completely unorchestrated by the researcher, that is me. The man set about asking the lady contractor questions, in fact, interrogating her while I just remained a spectator behind the camera. He interpreted her responses as she went about justifying her responses and actions referred to in their conversation. Likewise, there were younger men, although who were not willing to be interviewed due to their inherent shy nature and lack of confidence in speaking, allowed me to observe them throughout their day. They even chose to perform for the camera, coordinate the same themselves, while at times it was mediated by other non-participating subjects. I was a passive observer in such an instance as well, documenting the proceedings, having no momentary role to play in construction of the ongoings. They inspected the recordings, asked for a couple of recordings to be removed, but permitted for the rest to be used in the project. Likewise, the more than human has had a say in the multi-authorial, multi-perspectival, and non-hierarchical construction of Ginger's ethnography with IDOC practice. Within the mixed methods employed, ecoacoustics is about documenting the natural sound recordings that reflect the structure and functioning of an ecosystem of which the animal sounds are a part of. So we have been able to collect a full assemblage of species by capturing all the sounds in the surrounding ecosystem. The intention was to capture the seasonality of the soundscape alongside the cropping cycle of ginger to see what the overlaps bring to the understanding in terms of, let's say, species presence or absence, population density, population structure, species interactions, and ecosystem functions. So far, we've been able to capture recordings at the onset of summer coinciding with the ginger planting, intending to go on until ginger is harvested next autumn. These natural sound recordings project audio as another prominent source of evidence to answer wider ecosystem level questions alongside anecdotal evidence that are captured through the ethnographic work and participant observation, of course. And the open-ended inductive form of inquiry enables collaborative development of such methods of remote sensing evidence. These multimodal means of documenting human and more than human interaction in Ginger's landscape accounts for richness of data that become sources of validation of the region's biodiversity hotspot, as well as the practice of interactive documentaries allowing for a non-linear juxtaposed way of narrating different things. Such samples of approach to narrative and worlding practices involving participatory creation of content in a bottom-up approach using multimodal means will result in a nonlinear form of media output consolidated as a strategic impact documentary, a kind of documentary which will marry documentary storytelling and principles of strategic communication, as Nash and Connor put it. It is about aspiring to achieve alternate futures in the Western Ghats by aligning documentary practice with online and offline communication practices. So here I hand back Chiku from the Kabini catchment area to Daniel, because that's where I sit right now.
Thanks a lot, Bharat. So yeah, I'm going to talk now about a research project that we just applied for. So we just handed in the bid. It's called TETRA, Terrains in Transition, and I'm just going to read it. The TETRA project investigates ecological matters of care in 2 industrialized regions across Germany and the UK that are hotspots for supra-regional energy production. So that is the focus. And we've got 2 research questions which deal also with the software, because we are using Kosokoff and Stornoway in this research, which hopefully begins in 2024. The first goal of the project is to research Anthropocene landscapes and their communities with media-based methods. Second, the project contributes to new media-based methods and cooperative methods for care in Anthropocene research. So we already started to with the speculative research. I'm trying to get rid of this window. Here again, this network, and we've got, can you hear the sound? So that is built in Clint now. We've got the 2 locations, Hartheim, which is close to Freiburg, which has a nuclear power station, which was given up 2 years ago. And we've got Avonmouth on the British side, close to Bristol. Also an Anthropocene landscape in transition. I'm just going to play this for a few seconds. So what we did here, we did some agential cuts termed by Bharat by filming arbitrary force situations in Hartheim. That's what we did early January. And I arranged them in this kind of structure. And now you can just move over these arbitrary cuts that we did, and you find some text fragments. And these text fragments were generated by ChatGPT by giving some keywords to, for instance, the flooded gravel pit. So this project is like the one that we heard about right now by Bharat, also about the question of the human and the non-human actors. And ChatGPT speculated about how these human and non-human actors, like the asparagus fields of Hartheim, interact with our theoretical and participative approach. So you can look at that. Just share the link via Zoom. You can explore this by yourself. And the next step will be to transfer. So we went into a shooting place, really funny places, around hard time. And we will, in the next step, take these clips and play with them in Korsakoff by keywording the clips. And this will be introduced in Luzern at a conference in about 2 weeks' time, dealing with interactive documentary, and most of us will participate. So time's over, and here's the orange, this time to Florian.
Hurrah, thank you, Daniel. Looking forward to see you in Lucerne. In my part now, I would like to reflect a bit about a question that I think is central in ethnography, and that is how to look at something that you are a part of. And I would like to, so basically, like when you are looking at a system, like you see a very different thing than when you are within a system. And I would like to, I think that was also like what I stumbled across when I started Korsakoff. And this is because I grew up in Bavaria, as I said before, maybe, and I moved to Berlin, and Bavaria is a bit of well, I mean, people in Germany generally look at Bavarians like they are a bit odd and make fun of them. So I ended up being in Berlin, and but I left Bavaria for a reason. So I could very well understand why those people made fun of those Bavarians, and but they never got it right. Like they were like, there was something I could understand about their perspective, but there was more to it, and something that was really hard to express, and I could never convince anyone. I just tried a couple of times to give an inside Bavarian perspective. On top of that, I didn't like Bavarians myself. So how do you look at something that you are a part of? And so when you make a film, you use a camera and you point it at other people and you look at them from the outside. And I think what we did in this Polyphonic documentary was like doing a bit of a trick. So everyone filmed, everyone who was the object that we were looking at, us, filmed themselves. So they filmed either what they saw or what they turned the camera around and filmed themselves, like in front of the background that they were in front of the environment. So, and then we put it into a system or in systems that allow to not make a rigid structure, so that you don't make sure how to look at things, but that it changes its relation while you look at that. I think that was very quick. That was my part. And I now hand over the ball to Franzi.
Thanks, Florian. Okay, I'll just pick up from where I left off. So as I said earlier, the relationship between ethnographers and their tools is key for making polyphonic documentary. And I have called this conscious collaboration with software computational correspondence. And the term correspondence actually stems from Tim Ingold, who uses this term to describe a practice that does not seek to come up with an exact match of the world, which is sort of a little bit embedded in this whole documentary agenda. But it is more, correspondence is more seeking a practice that answers to the world with interventions and questions and responses of our own. So we're not trying to simulate anything. And this comes very close to the notion of, well, first of all, it reminds me a lot of non-representational methodologies like the ones that Philip Banini suggested. So we're moving away from representationalism altogether. But of course, it also reminds me of the notion of diffraction and diffractive ethnography. And yeah, with diffraction just being this physical behavior of waves hitting an obstacle. So for example, when a stone falls into the water and it creates these ripples and these overlapping patterns. Yeah, and so this comes from Karen Barad, and she sort of thinks that this extraordinary liveliness of the world, this active force of the world being alive, manifests itself in these diffractive phenomena. And these diffractive phenomena, these patterns and ripples, they don't really allow for any clear boundaries or oppositions, dichotomies, binary categories, but we love to think in those. And so it's very much opposed to a reflective practice, which ethnography has been believed to be, where you uphold this very strong divide still between object and subject and observer and the observed. But the diffractive practice is able to embrace notions of intervention, interference, disturbance. And this is in line with correspondence thinking. So I'm just going to leave you with 3 implications that I think this new, more conscious collaborative relationship between ethnographers and software could have. So first of all, it, I think, reconfigures our role as ethnographers, because it asks us to step back from our interpretational sovereignty and attribute some authorial control to the tools and the operations and underlying the digital mediation. So it's really much a process of unlearning what we've learned and relearning together with the tools when you are working in the tools and not outside of them. And second, it asks us to shift our perspective of making. So we need to really figure out what does it mean to make with the tools. So, and that also allows us to move away from othering, which is a apparent danger in ethnography, to more thinking about togethering, so engaging with the world. And then we can think of, maybe ethnography could be more like designing, or more like curating, or more like improvising, or when you think of Korsakov, rulemaking. So there's just different activities that we can engage with as ethnographers. And thirdly, the resulting research practice moves beyond representation and towards a mode of doing. So it's not about what it means, but more about what we do with it. And this doing is truly anchored in the here and now, in the present of practice, and also looks into the future. So it opens it up for speculations about the future. So we can think of this as producing sketches or prototypes in an iterative way, and then which moves us completely away from this end product, thinking about the end product, and more, which is usually like this causal linear output, and think more of what the shots and edits have to do with the next shots and edits. So more like opening up to a future-oriented interpretation. Yeah, and this also leads us into an anthropology in real time, and also about opening up research encounters to possibilities and future-facing encounters, and that are less fixated on creating hard lines, like boundaries between theory and practice. That could also be just way more fluid, and also process and output could be way more fluid. That's it from me. And I will hand the ball over one final time to Judith.
So I'll put my camera on. So yes, so as we're going through this, we're trying to create a dialogic generative discussion by passing it around, but actually we've spoken for over an hour and we haven't had interjections with questions. So you know, we're kind of experimenting with the format really. But I just wanted to say that the whole point of this project is that it's dialogic, and as Franzi said, it's forward-looking, and it's about looking forwards. It's about speculating. It's about working with the unknown, with uncertainty, and it's in particular, it's about unlearning. So, you know, just to kind of sum up this project, so there's about 70 people who are involved in the wider project, and we've had online reading groups and, you know, online discussions and meetings, and then we've had 2 iterations of a practical project. Each time we have between 25 and 30 active collaborators, you know, literally from all around the world. So people in Canada, people in Australia, people in Turkey, people in Portugal, India. You know, it's genuinely international, and we've been doing some sort of work with language as well. So sometimes saying to people, say something, you know, in your first language, and it's all about kind of decolonizing, decentering, and unlearning. And each time we do an iteration, we ask people to submit 3 clips, between 3 and 5, 30 seconds each, filmed on their, you know, on the mobile phone. So it's not fancy filmmaking. It's just pointing a camera and observing something. And as Florian said, it's quite personal and quite intimate, you know. So the first round was in just after lockdown, and everybody was sending very in-place clips about where they were sheltering in place. So it kind of, we put all these clips go in a big pot, in a big folder, and then everybody is free to use those clips, as Karen and Vanessa, you know, have shown, and kind of what we do with those clips to kind of rework them and experiment with them. And I did a project with one of my PhD students and a couple of other people in Bristol, and we met several times. And we started off, we looked at the clips, and we just, because Korsakoff works with keywords, you can pull out, you're looking at the clips. We each did on our own, what sort of keywords, what were those clips saying to us? And then we met and we made a big map of all the different keywords that we'd each come up with. And then we tried to sort of look at where the commonalities were. And this was with the extreme heat, because the project, it's polyphonicdocumentary.com. There's posts about the project on there, so you can look it up. But it's the idea of these kind of provisional ways of working, unlearning, decentering, decolonizing ourselves, both in a more than human way, but also challenging polarization and questioning, you know, is the way we tell our stories, the conventional way, is that part of the problem, and how are we going to make the shifts we need to make in this current era of multiple crises. So extreme heat fitted very well for climate crisis and very well with polarization. So we came up with a common theme for all of it, which was building to oblivion and just about human destruction. And then we thought, well, what do we do with that? And then I said, well, let's just put that to one side, and now let's look at all the clips through Korsakoff, and let's just give them one keyword and just look at them. They came in randomly. In the same way that Karen said, you had the main screen, and then you had 3 clips coming down the side. And we each kind of worked with those, and then we documented our thinking process as we were responding to the clips and deciding what clip to look at next in a very forward-looking, very intuitive way. And we're in the process of making, so we did that with Korsakoff, and we're in the process of making a Stornoway kind of documentation of that process. And as we shared our different thought patterns and thinking, you know, there was quite a bit of tussle going on between wanting to find meaning, wanting to think, well, what does it all mean? What's the common thread? What are all these random clips saying? And then other times when you just let go of that and just go with whatever the clips are saying. So you start to follow threads of water, or you start to see patterns of blue or color, very much the way that Vanessa and Zeynep and Karen have been pulling out. And for me, it was just really interesting, that tussle between the tussle to create meaning and to kind of rein the clips in, because they're quite messy. It's just a big messy hodgepodge of our different clips. And there is commonality, but also there's quite a lot of aesthetic dissonance and difference. So that tussle between wanting to make meaning, which is what we're all trained to do, and letting go of that and just allowing our thoughts to develop and flow. And at the end of that process, we kind of said, well, we've discussed this. What do we do now? What about that theme of building to oblivion? And suddenly that theme just seemed just one of many, many different ways of thinking through and with those clips. And that's where we've got to. It's just really interesting, that kind of unlearning. And as Franzi was saying, it's the mindset you bring to these tools and the way you're thinking about them. And are you thinking in a processual, a kind of forward-looking hermeneutic sort of way, or are you trying to rein them in to create some kind of authored meaning? And what tussle's going on in your head between those different processes? So we are just playing, learning, unlearning. And as Daniel says, the Tetra project, that's something, you know, quite a few of us here in this project are involved in. And that's a kind of taking that beyond the group out into a community setting and seeing where these ways of working have traction into community settings, and thinking about the more than human, thinking about toxic waste, thinking about communities that are affected by them, and how these tools, we can use them to start a conversation in communities about, you know, their own futures, with us as active interveners, making, as Daniel says, like agential cuts, you know, recognizing that we are active interveners in a collaborative context to start a conversation that we don't know where it'll go, that's quite open-ended, you know, and engaging with our own practice and building practice in the communities. And so it's all provisional, open-ended, but the whole point is it should be fun. And Back Team talks a lot about carnival, and that's, our meetings are really good for that, and the playfulness of what we're doing. So we have talked for longer than we intended, as is always the way. So splitting it up into 5 minutes and then doing 2 rounds has actually taken longer than we thought. So we haven't had much dialogue with you yet, but now's that opportunity to kind of open it up and just to hear from people in the room. Does this resonate? Does this, we've had quite a lot of discussion in our group, you know, the poly meet that Florian showed at the beginning, people saying that's how I think. And you talk to people and say, I don't think in a linear way. And it's really interesting that these tools can reflect a different way of thinking, you know, tools for thinking with. So I just wondered what anyone's responses or questions or thoughts. The floor is open. You can put your camera on, you can kind of talk to us, put stuff in the chat. Over to you.
I guess I have a question to Florian, because when I mean, I've watched your film before, but now that I saw it again, I kind of realized how really a lot of people, I mean, I was in that meeting and we were like 30 people, but really a lot of people were very active and voicing their opinions and their ideas, which in my experience is not so common for those big Zoom calls. So I just realized that again when you showed it before, and I was kind of wondering whether you got, because you shared it with the whole project and the whole group, whether you got any feedback from people if rewatching this meeting as this film help them in any way to work on their projects or to build their ideas for the project.
Did it help you?
It's hard to say. Yeah, just when I asked it, I kind of was wondering, did it help me? And I'm actually not sure. I haven't analyzed it to the end yet. But I think, I mean, that meeting in general was very important for us as a group, because we only built our group because of that meeting, because we were voicing our ideas and then kind of found out that we have similar ideas and therefore found each other as a group.
Yeah, I think you point me to something that I actually wanted to say in my second part and I forgot. And this is how important it is to feel something. So if you are within a system, like you can only feel, you cannot really see, like, or you can see things, but they look random in a way. because they are from all kinds of different perspectives. But what you can get is a sense of feeling. And this is what I don't know. I think it does not work for people from the outside. People that look at the artifact, I think they are highly confused and can't make much sense out of it. Or maybe they can, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But I could imagine that. But this is a project for us. So we look at us. And I think that because of these tools that we are using, this is like starting, that this happens more and more.
I think that's really important, this point that we're doing this for ourselves. It's that unlearning process, and that it is about the process. And there's something about, I mean, I've found it quite profound when you make some recordings about your, you know, just your daily life, and then you put them into a system, and then they're reflected back at you. And we're doing that in a collaborative way, where we're all putting bits of our daily lives into these clips, and then we're sharing them, and then we're using that to start a conversation between ourselves. You know, I think, yeah, I find that quite profound. And you know, it's about process and you know, different ways. So, you know, seeing those clips from that meeting put into a nonlinear system, you know, we had the context of that meeting, so it was particularly interesting to us. But if you hadn't been at that meeting, I don't know, you know, how that works. But Jonathan Harris, he did a project called Sputnik Observatory, where he talked to lots of scientists, and he did interviews, and then he put those interviews into an interactive system. And we haven't really talked much about relationality, but it's that ability to put different recordings into a system and bring them into a new form of relationality, which is different from how you would do it if you were to edit that into the single line of a finished edited film. And another of my PhD students is looking at the mullet in Ireland, where she's from, and there's an environmental project going on there, and she's recording environmentalists talking about the project, historians talking about the project, locals talking about their response to the project, and then putting those different, and it's very polyphonic because everybody is talking in their own language, and it's pure in that sense, each interview, and then putting them into dialogue and relationality through an interactive system, which you won't need to edit it all to a single line to make a film. It's about making smaller media and these multi-layered pathways, which I think could be what Bharat is doing. And we're exploring this at the moment. You know, it's an exploration. We don't have answers. It's provisional, and you know, we're unlearning and thinking about things in different ways.
I think I find it very inspirational, and the current project I'm developing with a few other collaborators in different fields, we're actually doing something quite similar to this. So last year we had a 3-4 month fieldwork research in China, and in my team we have anthropologists, filmmakers, theater directors, architects. So we kind of now in the process of re-looking at the images we created, the notes we make, and so basically going through our memories and re-edit all the materials we have, which I find it quite similar to the ways you guys are working, first collecting materials from everyone, and then you remixed it, you have keywords, you kind of create new meanings from it, and everyone has a different perspective on the same materials. So it really creates a lot of surprises, and we are also in the process of trying to find connections between those random thought. So I find that quite fascinating. We don't know where we're going forward, but I definitely find it's a very interesting way of collaborating. Especially with people coming from different fields.
Amazing. What software are you using, or how are you putting all these together?
So we're not using any particular software. It's really just Premiere editing. Yeah, but I think it's the way that you use juxtapositions through sound, image, text, and sequencing. So it's less about software itself. It's more of this process, how we process information and remix everything. There's multi-layers. It's basically first come from my collaborator working in theater. So when they started the project, they start with a common like reading group. For example, reading a book, and they extract different paragraphs from the book. So each session, the choreographer works with the dancer and to create a new piece out from that same texts. And they reiterate the texts in different work sessions, and then to reach finally a coherent performance. But there is a lot of improvisation and artistic interpretation in it, and you will never know when you started the project where you're going to end. So we're kind of adapting that process into the current project we're developing.
Do you have a link or anything, or give us an I mean, there's so much alignment there. It's really interesting.
Yeah, we presented yesterday. Yeah, in another panel, so you can probably watch the link later.
Yeah,
I can send that through.
Thank you. Yeah.
A
Do you
question?
remember the name of the panel, Jen, just so it's easy for us to find?
It's work in progress panel yesterday. Oh, but we didn't. But we asked not to record it actually.
Oh, really?
Work in progress. I'd love to join one of your group next time to talk more.
Yeah. No, definitely. How do we? You put your email in the chat, or
I can.
Brilliant. Yeah. So yes, but this idea of it's about putting things into dialogue, that dialogic, and putting and respecting the different frames of reference and the different ways of talking about things, the different perspectives, and keeping them in a way quite pure, and then bringing them into dialogue, and then seeing where that goes and what that throws up. And the Florian's tool with with the keywords, it just I mean, Franzi, we're doing a workshop on this at the main festival on the Saturday in Bristol. So if anyone who's around happens to be in Bristol who was able to come, but it's that it just throws up surprises. I think that's the real thing. It's open-ended and surprising, and new juxtapositions. It just enables you. It enables your thoughts to go off down all sorts of different unexpected trains if you let it, if you approach it with that mindset. That's the key thing. It's the mindset that you bring to it, I think.
Yeah, which is a difficult part. You have to be very, very open in the beginning, because you might find very frustrating and confusing when you start to see how the other people make sense of their world.
Yes.
But I think after a while, it kind of all makes sense. But we had our own struggles, like couldn't see why people think that way. But it's the process of finding it, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it is really important to embody the practice. So because it is so weird, like to not make sense of things in a linear way, because we're so used to doing that. We learned that in school. To unlearn that needs practice. So it is really important to not just think about it, but like use a camera, use the tools, and go and do it to get it inside the body.
Yeah.
It's also systems thinking, isn't it? We talk a lot about, Florian talks a lot about cybernetics, and systems thinking rather than linear thinking. And yeah, it's just new pathways to knowledge, isn't it? Different ways of engaging with the world. And for me, it's one doesn't replace the other, but it's just opening up new tools and new methods and new possibilities that have their use, but that it's not useful for everything, and it's not necessarily useful for a whole project, but it's just opening up new practices, really, and then thinking what those practices can be, how they can be useful to us as ethnographers and anthropologists and media makers and collaborators.
A lot of what we, a lot of what we end up discussing in our group is this question around authorship and narration, or narrative structure. So although we're aware that we're sort of trying to unlearn some of this need for control in authoring the direction of thought of the person, the audience. So we're open to the happy accidents and to the surprises and to the new meanings, but we've realized that whatever we do, we are guiding, even within these two different softwares, we are guiding the viewer on their journey by the way we give them their choices in the first place. So I think that this question between linear and non-linear, and authored and unauthored is a really important aspect of our what we're exploring, what we're learning. The learning to let go is also a little bit about learning different forms of control in some ways, or different forms of guiding.
And also when Steph and I first did this call and we got all the clips in, the previous round, there was a much more coherence to them because it was locked down, it was sheltering in place. They all felt, although aesthetically they were quite mixed, that there was a real coherence to them based around a particular moment in history of just coming out of lockdown. Whereas this time there was a particular moment because it was last summer when lots of heat records had been broken, and people were beginning to think, oh my God, it's really starting to play out now, the climate situation. But at the same time, the clips were much more eclectic and people had approached them in different ways. And I had an anxiety, and Stefan as well. Does this mean anything? Is there any meaning to this? Because as scholars, as academics, you're thinking, well, I'm kind of using my university research time. There has to be some meaning to this. And then it's been really interesting just to see how different, so there's different groups of people have started making work, and how those conversations we have are really generative. And in a way, the work that Karen has shown today with Vanessa and kind of have reined in that mess. It's turned the mess into some, you have produced some quite elegant things, which is interesting, that desire to produce elegance, because if you compare that with just the mosh of all the different clips, it's interesting. They are, you've created some things of beauty, really, and that's interesting as well. What different people will do with these clips. And if we're going to do, like with the Tetra project, we're going to work in communities and we're going to open this up to people with less skill as makers. What does that mean? How will that process develop? And that's the whole thing around aesthetics, I think, is really interesting, and audience and communication and beauty, and that definitely is a tussle as well, I think. Unmaking meaning. Yeah, indeed. Do you want to say any more about that, Franzi?
Well, it's still a challenge for me as well, but I stumble upon it again and again, how hung up we are on meaning, and especially in ethnography and anthropology, where it is a very human category, meaning. And when we are trying to, and then just a practice like this in this project shows us how unstable meaning is, or how quickly it can change when the context changes, or when there's different perspectives involved. So it's very, just sort of unstable and sort of just flicks through my hands, and I can't really grab it. And it's especially when we bring the non-human into play. For the non-human, meaning isn't really a category at all. So if we want to decenter the human, I think it's also decentering meaning from just looking what else is there.
It's an interesting challenge, isn't it? And all our systems and structures work against that, don't they, in a way? Yeah.
I mean, what I really find fascinating is like when you take a meaning and then you look at it and like you look at it from different angles, then you understand that actually like that is not the meaning. I mean, there are maybe other meanings, and in a way, everything becomes kind of meaningless. So maybe the meaning that we put into things is basically a construction in the first place. We make it up. We make up the meaning. I mean, we make up the meaning by talking about it. So like we show basically these meaningless projects or so that might look meaningless to some people. And now we talk about it and we get to a certain understanding, and now suddenly it becomes that meaning that wasn't there in the first place. So where does it come from? It's crazy.
I mean, that's what I was saying with our building to oblivion. You know, we found meaning and we were really pleased with ourselves, and suddenly it all made sense. And that's what this project's all about building to oblivion. And then we completely undid that. And then at the end said, so now what? And that's still a big question, you know, now what? Francie and I have talked about this. When things become meaningless, when you no longer value the meaning, then it's like, okay, now what? You know, it's really interesting.
When was that point exactly that you realized the meaning that you felt is created? The moment you thought, oh, you know what the project is about, and then it fell apart again. So are there like typical markers that could identify those?
Well, with that, it was pre-Korsakoff and post-Korsakoff. So pre-Korsakoff, looking at it on and making our map and actually looking for meaning. And then I said, right, let's reject that now. Let's forget that. Now let's go into Korsakoff. And then there were so many different meanings that it was kind of like, well, each time we look at them, if you allow yourself, you know, you're going to find new meanings. And so it's like just blowing up, you know, Korsakoff just gives you, can give you, if you just play with it and create new juxtapositions, because it's random, you know, you can just go on creating, you know, just using the clips as stimulus for your own thought patterns and processes, you know. And it reminded me of working the project I did with Wendy James and her professor at Oxford on her materials in the Sudan. And I used kind of that process a lot for working with her materials, exploring, finding new resonances and juxtapositions, which then we used to then create, to then pull some meaning out and to create some, we made a website and it was non-linear, different voices and stuff. But, you know, that process of working between you know, opening up to find new meanings and then articulating the meanings that we've found, or, you know, it's a tussle. I think there's a flow between, but if you just end up with no meaning, well, yeah, and what does that, well, you know, where'd you go with that?
What? Yeah, well, what you said, like I wrote it down. Actually, I did. So first you were looking for meaning, then you tried to pull out the meaning, and you tried to find meaning. So what do you expect you would find?
When we were looking for meaning.
You were looking for meaning, and then you found meaning. So how would
and it was deep. It was building to oblivion. You know, it was that we had this shared collective sense of that we were building, you know, humans were just building to our own destruction. That felt quite profound at the time.
But how would it be? No, it's a great approach, but how would it be to change the perspective and then basically not look for the meaning, but look for the not meaning?
Well, that's what we did then with Korsakoff. That's what we did. Or we just found our own personal meanings, and we sort of thought each time we look at these, we were in the moment. That's where we were using the clips as stimulus for our own thinking and thought processes in the moment. So sometimes we were following water, following color, you know, just seeing different things in them each time we saw the clips.
So you said
so it had meaning, but it just had so many meanings
that it became
so much potential meaning. That's what it had meanings, didn't it?
Yeah, but is meanings the opposite of, you know, like there is a meaning and then the opposite of that is it has many meanings, or is the opposite that it has no meaning?
Well, I guess it had many meanings, or it just allowed your thought processes to flow. So Franzi's put something in the chat. So it's not meaningless. That process felt profound as well, but it was then, okay, so what do we do with this? How do we construct an artifact out of it? And we decided that we didn't need to construct an artifact. It had just been a useful and interesting process. And that's what we came to concluded, I think, that it was a process and we didn't need to turn the process into a product. Except we are, because we're documenting the process.
Yes.
But, that becomes
thereby,
a product.
And thereby creating an artifact and meaning at the same time.
Yeah, probably.
And in terms of I'm just want to go back to my thing of authorship and linearity. That in both the softwares that we're working in, Korsakoff and Stornoway, you choose the opening, you choose how the thing starts, you have to choose where everyone's who's watching or engaging with this, where they begin, and you can choose where they end, and you can decide in the way you work with the software how many options or how much randomness or how much control you want. So in the Stornoway project that I showed a little bit, and the links there, I consciously made it so that you couldn't go round and round in circles. The clips I chose were ones that inherently informed the meaning. So they were clips that had meaning built into them. And then I consciously chose how you would begin and how you would end and which options you could go through in the middle. So although the journey is going to be different for everyone, there's probably, and I'm sure there's a mathematical way to find out how many ways you could watch it, but thousands. But at the same time, that the reason I in the 5 minutes made sure that I showed you the first and the last is because by just having the setup and the conclusion, it's the development, in this 3-act structure or a structure of an argument can be a little bit more fluid, I think. So I think there is so much possibility in both softwares. The way that we worked with the color and sound, we are definitely thinking about meaning making, and you noticed, you said, isn't it beautiful, or the aesthetic, we're doing that on purpose. We're thinking of that is part of the meaning, that when you are looking at these colors that shift into different colors, or the sounds that work with one another, the fact that you are then going to see shadows and ripples and fire in different ways and different orders will we've talked a lot about our intention. We're clear about the meaning. We are ideally wanting people to absorb somehow by their engagement with the process, and that meaning is about the relationship with nature, effectively, and with the planet. So I think yeah, the idea of it being meaningless and meaning, it's obviously a big point of what we're all discussing, but in my experience, I really think that by the doing, it becomes more and more clear that it would be very difficult not to add meaning somehow by that creative process.
Yeah, we have to finish now, but I think what's really interesting is we get a series of clips on a common theme, we put them in a big pot, we then have these meetings which are really important for kind of brokering, because that's another thing, the orchestration behind the scenes that's going on with me and Stefano to kind of broker the relationships and get the co-creation going. But then very different ways of working with the same materials come to light, and you've just witnessed typical crazy conversation about the meaningless of meaning. It's a good reflection of the kind of conversations we're having in our meetings. So if anybody's interested in knowing more about our crazy project, go to the website and you can get in touch. And if we manage to do another iteration, we hope we will. We hope this will go on. It's just a matter of time and what we can all do within our busy lives. But we really enjoy this, and I think we find the conversations quite meaningful or quite profound, or and they'll ripple through in our practice, I'm sure, in other projects that we do and other collaborations that we develop. So Karen's talking about this in relation to one of her other projects in about 5 minutes time. What panel number is it?
I just put it on the chat. It's number, it's work in progress 5C, decolonizing.
And then
it's I think it is relevant that it's come directly out of this polyphonic documentary group. So then all that we apply in our group, I've taken into another project. So I think that's another important
thing. And then Franzi and I are doing in the main festival in Bristol on Saturday morning. We're doing a polyphonic documentary workshop where we'll be going through this process in a live performative way with clips and with audience participation to try and sort of make the experience come to life a bit more. So there's that, and but watch this space on the project on the blog on the website. I've just put a placeholder in saying we're working with extreme heat, but we're going to put more posts up about the different projects and things coming out of it, hopefully written by the different groups of people working on it. So that's will be coming out in the weeks to come. So thank you very much, everybody, and hope it's got you thinking about some things or been useful. And welcome to our crazy world. And thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.